Hello everyone, welcome to Time Online Classes. This is the next session of reading comprehension. We have gone through a session of reading comprehension earlier, wherein we have discussed certain fundamentals and basics related to reading comprehension. We are going to run through some of that again and add on to that. So today, the handout that we will be referring to, that is RCHO Reading Comprehension handout, is 3532003. All right, before we start with the handout, let us look at certain things that we have to keep in mind while reading. Number one, paraphrase. Now, what is that? That means as you are reading, you try to understand what the author is saying. He may have used difficult words, complex sentences, very complex analogies. You're supposed to break them down into an easy way to understand. Supporting ideas, pay attention to the supporting ideas that the author has used in order to explain his viewpoint to you. And of course, finally, when you finish reading the passage, you should have the central idea or the main idea that the author is trying to convey very clear in your mind. So we have to understand the words and the statements that are written. We have talked about the importance of vocabulary and grammatical tools earlier. We have talked about the tone and style of writing. So all that will help you to comprehend the passage better. You have to understand the logical relationships between the paragraphs and the different concepts that the author has presented. The way different paragraphs are linked from one to the other. If you don't understand the link, that means there is something there, something in the gap that is missing. There's some gap in your understanding over there. You have to be very careful that there is a logical relationship of the idea flow from one paragraph to the next. You'll have to draw inferences from the given facts and statements. Now, inferences are, what are they? Do you remember? We discussed them earlier. Assumptions and inferences. Both of these will not be stated directly in the passage. You have to read in between the lines on the basis of the tone, the approach of the author, the words he has used. You have to get a deeper understanding of what the author is trying to say. And then you have to interpret and analyze the information given in order to reach the conclusions. That is, all these things need to be done if you are to get to the central idea properly. Now, there are different types of questions that are there. Broadly speaking, we can say that there are direct questions and indirect questions. Both the types can appear in your exam. Now, if there is a direct question, that means the answer to that is directly given. So what will happen? If there is a direct question and I get it wrong, chances are that many others are going to get it correct. So that is going to be very bad for you. So read very carefully so that you don't get any direct question wrong. Now for the indirect questions, there has to be a deeper, better understanding, and we'll see how we are going to get that. There are different types of questions that they can ask you. They can ask you to identify the central idea. So there is going to be a question. There are going to be a number of, most of the time 4, sometimes 5 answer options, and you have to pick the best answer. Sometimes you have to pick more than one answer. So the question can say, what is the main idea? What is the central idea? What is the prime purpose of the author? All these types of questions are central idea questions. In fact, even the question that asks you to assign a title, that is also a central idea question, because the title that you give must be related to the central idea of the passage. See, when you pick up a book to read, or when you read an article which has got a heading, So the title of the book, the heading of the article, they tell you what that particular article contains, what that book contains, and then you make up your mind whether you want to buy that book or read that article or not. So the title should convey or should be directly related to the central idea. It should be short, it should be attractive. Another question that often appears in the reading comprehension part is to identify the author's assumption. Now, when the author presents an argument, there are certain assumptions on which he bases those arguments. The question may be that you are asked to identify the assumption. Then it can also happen that you're asked to think one step ahead, read in between the lines, get into the mind of the author, and find out exactly what he's trying to say, not just what is written. And that would be to form an inference. Another type of question can be to assess the strengths and weaknesses of the author's argument. Now, if you see, most of these questions, in fact, all of them till now, are more or less based on critical reasoning. Hence, critical reasoning and reading comprehension, CR and RC, they go hand in hand. You can be asked to identify the author's tone. For such a question, the answer options are typically single words. So you need to have a good enough vocabulary. You need to understand the connotations of different words, whether it's a positive word or a negative word. That also is going to be a big help for you to get to the correct answer. Then there are true and false questions. These can be direct questions or they can be inferential questions. They can be either. There can be questions based on descriptive details that are given in the passage. So obviously that makes it a direct question. They can be odd one out or they can be except questions. Now these are little time consuming and they are more often than not inferential questions. So out of the 4 options given, maybe 3 of them are similar, then the one that is not similar would be your odd one out. The except question. Now these types of questions have become very popular. All of the following are true according to the passage except, right? With all of the following options strengthen what the author is saying except. So that means then you have to look for an option that is not strengthening. So it may be weakening the author's point of view or it may be just irrelevant. So, and there are other types of questions too. As we go through the passage, we'll see the different question types and we'll see how to deal with them. There's another type of question that is to identify a counter argument. The author is presented a particular aspect, a particular perspective with the help of some reasoning or logic that is used. You may be asked to pick an option that presents a counter argument to what the author is saying. Let's apply all this to the first passage, which is of only 1 paragraph. Now, when we talk about the length of the reading comprehension passage, in most of the cases, it is not going to be just 1 paragraph. The reading comprehension passage will consist of a number of paragraphs. So we start with a 1 paragraph passage, see how much the author has written or how less he has written. 1 paragraph. So what comes to mind is that maybe it's a small one, but to realize that in this 1 paragraph, he has stated so many things. There are so many questions that can be based on this 1 paragraph itself. Later on, we will move to lengthier passages. Let's read this passage. The greatest drawback of, now before we read this, it is very important that you read the directions. Never miss reading the directions. So the directions here say, read the following passage and answer the question given. The greatest drawback of independent India is that it cannot educate all. While successive governments were eloquent on their future plans, they were rather mute on what they had already done. So we are talking about India, we are talking about the lack of education. Not everybody has got the access to education. And then there are two opposite words that they have used over here, eloquent and mute. So governments, one after the other, they talk of their future plans, but they keep quiet on the accomplishments, if any, related to this subject. Hence, despite the renewed enthusiasm of the union and state governments to mend the constitution to provide free and compulsory education for all children until the age of 14, it remains to be seen whether they will put the money where their mouth is. So this statement tells us that again the union and the state governments are making promises to provide free and compulsory education for children under the age of 14, but the author is skeptical. He says, let's see whether they fulfill their promise or not. While the proposal is commendable, careful thought must be given to the academic, administrative, and financial requirements to fulfill the obligation. So he is happy about the promise. At the same time, he thinks that certain conditions, certain other aspects have to be first taken care of. And then he says, to begin with, new primary and upper primary schools should be established within easy reach of rural habitations. So he's asking for primary and upper primary schools to be set up near villages. So his focus is on education for the poor. Then in last sentence says, attempts have to be made to improve the student-teacher ratio and provide adequate teaching material. So again in this sentence, the author is making certain suggestions. One is to improve the student-teacher ratio. What does this mean? That means one student, one teacher. Or does it mean one teacher, many students, one teacher, few students? It means one teacher and few students. So he doesn't want one teacher to be taking care of many students. And then he says, provide adequate teaching materials also. So this whole paragraph, when you read, there are certain things that register as you read. So what is the skeleton of the paragraph? What is the main idea that he has given over here? So if we see, if you look at the next thing that is there, that is we are talking about the gist. So the gist of the paragraph is that we are talking about India, independent India, and its problems, and the main problem being education. So we have India, we have the drawback that is there. In which field are we talking about? We're talking about education. What is the government's role? Has the government done something commendable according to the author? No, they just make promises. Author suggestions, author says that he's happy about the promises provided, and he can see that the promises can be fulfilled provided certain steps are first taken. So this is the gist of the passage. Now, if we go to the questions over here, the first question is dealing with the title, finding a suitable title for the passage. The options given are the need for better schools, better. Now, better is a comparative word. Need for better schools means that there are good schools. Now we need better ones. But the paragraph does not say that we have schools or we have good schools. In fact, he's asking the government to set up the schools. So one is ruled out. Two, the need to mend the constitution. Proper title to need to mend the constitution. No, the point of mending the constitution is mentioned, but in another context. That is not the central idea of the passage. Free and compulsory education in India and how to improve primary education. Now, is the paragraph talking only about primary education, or is it talking about free and compulsory education in India? Yes, free and compulsory education mentioned there. So the correct answer over here is the third one. The next question. The phrase put the money where their mouth is, according to the passage, refers to. Now, who are the there? If you go back to that sentence, what does that say? Despite the renewed enthusiasm of the union and state governments, to do what? To mend the constitution, to achieve what? To provide free and compulsory education for all children until the age of 14. Author remarks, and the author puts forth his own opinion. He says that it remains to be seen whether they, that is the government, will put the money where their mouth is, whether they are really going to fulfill this promise or not. Looking at the options, the spending of money on food by the government, on food, irrelevant topic here. The misuse of money by politicians, corruption, not discussed here. The spending of money as declared by the government, the spending of money on what? On improving the infrastructure in the education. So yes, this can be an answer. Fourth says the swindling of money meant for infrastructure. Now, swindling is again related to corruption, meant for infrastructure. Now, if you just use the word infrastructure, it would mean the roads, the dams, and the other things that are there. Whereas when we say infrastructure of the education, then we are talking about schools and teaching material and teachers. So fourth is again irrelevant. So we see that our correct answer is the third option. It means to spend the money where they had declared. The third question. It asks you to identify one step which the author does not mention. Mend the constitution to make education compulsory. This has been mentioned in the context that the state and union governments, they are wanting to do this. The second one says establish new primary and upper primary schools. Third is improve student-teacher relationship. The fourth is provide adequate teaching material. Now when we see, one is mentioned, two is mentioned towards the end, that is author's suggestion. Three, improve student-teacher relationship. What is mentioned here is improve student-teacher ratio, not relationship. So this is something that is not mentioned. What about the fourth? Provide adequate teaching material. That is also there. The last part of the paragraph says that. So there's a clear-cut answer over here that to improve student-teacher relationship has not been mentioned by the author in the passage. So we see how we arrive at the answer over here. We analyze, we go over what is written in our minds. We do not go back and read every time. Now, looking at the next question that is there, as I said, there are different types of questions. We will be seeing most of them in the handouts that follow. The next question says, according to the passage, the author appreciates the efforts of the government in the educational field. Does he appreciate? Was he applauding what the government is doing? Was he using a positive tone or a negative tone? So he was using a negative tone. So the first option cannot be your answer. Adopts a pessimistic approach to the idea behind providing free education to all. Pessimistic approach. That's an extreme condition. So is the author sure that nothing is going to happen? The scenario is completely hopeless. Nothing can be done to improve the education scenario in India. That is not the case. He says that yes, he suggests certain things to be done that is going to help in the education of the poor. So 2 is an extreme answer, so cannot be your answer. The third one says, the author proclaims that despite its best efforts, the government cannot educate all. Now this also has a negative tone. It means that the government is trying, but it will not be able to achieve this objective of educating all. Now, according to the author, the government is not trying enough also, right? So then this again is ruled out. The fourth one says, the author feels that the first step towards providing education to all children should start with increasing the number of schools in the villages. Now this part is validated by the second last statement, which says that new primary and upper primary schools should be established within easy reach of rural habitations. So clearly the answer for this question is option 4. The fifth question over here. One paragraph and so many questions. The fifth question says that in this passage, the author has mocked the government. Mocked. What does mock mean? When you mock someone, that means you are laughing at that person. You're making fun of that person. So you are deriding that person. So basically it's a negative word. But it means making fun. But is the author making fun of the government? No, he's not. He's not appreciating the government. He feels that the government is not doing enough, just making promises which they are not fulfilling. But he's not mocking the government. The next option, he recommended steps to be taken. If you see the last two sentences, if you remember, the author recommended certain steps, new schools to be set up, student-teacher ratio to be improved, adequate teaching materials to be provided. So yes, this is there. Third, being enthusiastic in support of the government, contradictory. He is not enthusiastic in supporting the government. Rather, he is critical of the government. 4, held the government at fault for its failures to educate all. Now which one? 2 or 4? He has directly stated the steps that need to be taken. Hence our correct answer over here should be option 2. So you see, different types of questions are to be dealt with in different ways. For the direct question, sometimes you need to go back and cross-check what is written. But for the inferential questions, in almost all the cases, you will get to the answer if you have understood the passage and the central idea carefully. Okay, so ready for the next passage? This will be lengthier than one paragraph. Let's start reading. Read the following passage and answer the questions. It says big corporates are looting banks in nexus with top bosses. Mid-segment borrowers have looted bank branches in towns and cities, and small borrowers have decided not to repay the bank loans in villages and towns. So the word loot over here that has been used. Now this is not related to any hold-up kind of thing. It just means that they are not the borrowers over here, the mid-segment borrowers as well as the big corporates plus the small borrowers, all of them are taking loans from the banks and are defaulting. They are not paying the bank back, and that is the loot that the author is talking about. Now, slow poison of small bad loans or deep poison of bulk loans both have harmed banks to a great extent. Bank staff are mostly silent spectators of large-scale loot, and to save their corrupt colleagues, they allow exploitation of good bankers. They allow exploitation of good bankers in order to save the skin of their corrupt colleagues. So they know what is happening, but they don't do anything about it. So what is the line of thought over here? Look at the keywords. We are talking about banks. We are talking about bad loans, about borrowers not paying loans, all kinds of borrowers, big, small. bank staff being silent. They know what is happening, but they are not saying anything. And the author has used a very interesting word in the beginning. In nexus with top bosses. What does nexus mean? It means collusion, getting together in order to do something wrong. So over here we can see the nexus between, or rather among, the corporates, the bank, and the staff too, you can say. The second paragraph. Politicians are using banks for political gain, and they do not want to punish officials of administrative and legal machineries who are willfully not acting against defaulters of banks. So these officials know who the defaulters are, but they are not taking any action. Are the politicians asking them to take action? No. They also are keeping quiet. Why? Because of their political gain. Audit and inspection department of each bank is also manned by dirty officers or are suffering from heavy workload due to less number of staff. So the in-house audit and inspection department of the banks, those officers, the men in that department are also either corrupt or there are not enough people, there are not enough men to, there are not enough employees or staff to handle the problem. They just do the formalities of auditing and inspecting the banks. They are not allowed to give true report of bad lending and fraudulent transactions, even if some of honest auditors like to report on it. So he says that not everybody is dishonest. There may be some honest auditors also, but they are not allowed to present the true picture by the higher officials. Now they have to give good rating to all branches and submit certificate of good health to their bosses, even if they detect causes of fraud or bad loans by bank officials or any irregularities that are there. So the whole idea is to push the whole thing under the carpet and don't tell anyone about what is happening. Keep quiet about it. So again, when we summarize in our minds, there are politicians, there are officials, there are audit and inspection department. All of them, what do? They hide the malpractices for their own benefit. So again, we see the nexus working over here. The third paragraph, RBI nominated statutory auditors or concurrent auditors or RBI inspectors are also functioning in the same way as others are. So this sentence says that the author expects the RBI officials to perform or behave in a better way than others, but they are not doing so. They are victims of gift and bribes, so they are also corrupt, he says. They all want red carpet welcome by bank officials. Huge money spent on auditors, internal or external, after all comes from banks' expenditure accounts or bad borrowers who managed all illegal expenses to remain in good books of banks' bosses. So the whole idea of corruption continues, the nexus continues over here. So even RBI nominated auditors, inspectors are corrupt. Coming to the next paragraph. RBI believes in getting certificates of good health from bank CEOs. Whenever any exposure of top bosses comes to light, they will write a letter to the concerned bank, and bank in turn will give a certificate stating everything is right. RBI has neither will to verify the truth, nor do they have enough staff to verify the veracity of such certificates. So RBI does not have the will. That means it does not really want to verify the truthfulness of these certificates. Veracity means truthfulness. And at the same time, it is also understaffed. Reading ahead. Several scams and numerous frauds similar to Satyam scam has surfaced But none of top officials, ministers, politicians, borrowers, and government officials have been taken to task. That means none of the top brass have been punished. Always a few junior officers are subjected to little punishment to close the cases of frauds and scams involving hundreds and thousands of crores of rupees. So all the corrupt people that are there, the politicians, the corporates, the big borrowers, the small borrowers, the auditors, the inspectors. Yes, so what do? Together, they hide the truth. They do not give the correct picture of the health of the banks. And if at all something comes to light, some scam comes to light, some junior officers are given small punishments and then they are let off, and the whole thing is then again pushed under the carpet. So frauds and scams are prevalent. No top officials are held responsible. A few junior officers given little punishments to close the cases. So till here, what we have read is that the situation is bad. Author is not happy about it. Let's see what happens in the next paragraph. It says, if RBI honestly investigates the reason for each bad account of 1 crore and above, I think majority of current or retired CMD, ED, GM, DGM, AGM and chief ministers will go to jail. So again he is reiterating the point that the top officials, the people in the top ranks are the ones who are to be held responsible. It will not be an exaggeration to say that only corrupt officers have reached top levels and only corrupt officers have moved fast in their career. Author certainly has got a very bad opinion of the top officials here. And it is they who have damaged banks and who will further add fuel to fire, because till now no concrete step has been taken to reverse the trend and no action has been taken against a real culprit to send the clear message down the line that cases of corruption will not be tolerated. So the way the things stand, what will happen? Since people get, they are allowed to go scot-free, they will keep on indulging in corrupt practices. So summarizing in one sentence, corrupt top officials and politicians are the reason behind the bad state of affairs of banks, and according to the author, no remedial action has been taken so far. We come to the questions. The sixth question. Which of the following is or are true in the context of the passage? Small borrowers have decided to repay the bank loans in villages and towns. No, the first part of the first paragraph itself says that even small borrowers are defaulting. So A cannot be your answer. B, small bad loans or bulk loans both have harmed banks to a great extent. That is mentioned. So B has to be part of your answer. Now if you quickly have a look at the answer options, there are only two options that have got B. A and B, B and C. We have already eliminated A. So obviously our answer should be B and C. Still let us check. C says bank staff mostly save their corrupt colleagues. Now this is also given in the first paragraph, last sentence. So the correct answer is B and C, option 2. Moving to the next question. According to the passage, what does the bank staff do to save their corrupt colleagues? They allow exploitation of good bankers, stated in the passage. They bribe the witnesses of corruption. Witnesses of corruption. This part is not there. Bribes indirectly, directly have been mentioned, but that is to cover up the scams given to auditors, the red carpet that is laid down for auditors and inspectors, that part is mentioned, but bribe the witnesses of the corruption, not mentioned. They allow large-scale corruption without informing the police. Police is not there in the passage. So this is again out of context. They take help from big politicians, corrupt bank staff in order to save their corrupt colleagues. It is not written that they go to big politicians to do this, to save the skin of their colleagues. So this is also ruled out. So the correct answer has to be the first one, which says that bank staff, what do? They allow exploitation of good bankers in order to save their corrupt colleagues. See, for some of the questions we have to go back and cross-check and read. Some questions we will not need to go back and read at all if our first reading of the passage has been really good and our comprehension has been good. The next question. What action does the RBI take whenever any exposure of top bosses of banks comes to light? What does the RBI do? They take strict action against the bosses. Rather, it's given that RBI also plays it very easy. They don't really take any action. They try to solve the matter. No, they don't. That is also stated. They have written, if you remember, the paragraph says that, one of the paragraphs, it says that the RBI appointed officials and inspectors, they also don't do their job. They are also corrupt. RBI is understaffed. That is also given. So they take the matter to the governor. Not mentioned at all. They write a letter to the bank. This is given. Whenever they come across any kind of misappropriation of funds that has been brought to their notice, what do? Or any kind of wrongdoing that is there, they write a letter to the bank. What does the bank do? The bank gives them a certificate that everything is all right. What does the RBI do? Accept that certificate easily. And then everything is fine, everything is hunky-dory, everybody is happy. That is what the paragraph said. So the correct answer over here should be option 4. So you see, it's not all that difficult. As you read, you form certain opinions, you understand some things, you keep those key ideas, key features of each paragraph in mind, and you keep reading ahead, and then you get the complete understanding of the passage and you answer the questions based on that. The first two passages, I was giving you the central idea. Now what I want you to do is to pick up that pen, and as we read the passage, you should be making a note of the key idea of that particular passage. Let's read the passage over here. Again, read the following passage and answer the questions given. Now, once upon a time, that reminds you of fairy tales. So this looks like a story. Let's see. See how small words right at the beginning also they're giving you certain clues. Once upon a time, there were two incredibly intelligent and capable boys. Their wonderful talents were obvious from an early age, and they could easily outdid everyone around. They had always known they were special, and they harbored a desire that, in the future, everyone would come to admit how exceptional they were. So, what is the central idea over here? The author has introduced us to two characters over here, two very intelligent and capable boys, and what they want for their future. They want to be known as exceptional by everyone. Now, let's see what happens in the story after this. Each of them developed a different way. That means each of them grew in different ways. The first used all his talent and intelligence to have a successful career and show everyone his superiority. He took part in all kinds of competitions, visited the most important people in places, and was great at making friends in high positions. Even when he was very young, no one doubted that someday he would be the wisest and most important person in the land. The second boy, equally aware of his own capabilities, never stopped feeling a heavy responsibility. He would do almost any task better than those around him, and he would feel obliged to help others or help them. This didn't leave him enough time to follow his own dreams of greatness. He was always busy looking for ways to help others more effectively. As a result, he was much loved and well known even as a boy, but only in his own small circle. Now here, initially the two boys, they start off on a similar footing. As they grow, one of them becomes famous or well known, the other is well known but only in his own circle. So one is very ambitious, the other has ambitions, has his own aspirations, but still at the same time he spends a lot of time in helping others. Then it says, destiny was such that a great disaster struck that land, spreading problems and misery far and wide. The first of those brilliant young men had never come across anything like this, but his brilliant ideas worked successfully throughout the land, and they managed to slightly improve the situation. To slightly improve the situation. But the second young man was so used to solving all kinds of problems and had such useful know-how in certain subjects that the disaster hardly affected the people in his region at all. His admirable methods were then adopted across the land, and the fame of this good and wise man spread even more than that of the first young man. Indeed, he was soon elected governor of the whole nation. The two of them did their own good jobs. Both of them were brilliant in their own ways. But what happened? So this is like which story does this remind you of? This reminds me of the hare and the tortoise story. So over here what happened? The first boy, even though he became well known, the second boy, yes, who not only did good for himself, but he also wanted to help the others right from the beginning. And he was accustomed to different kinds of problems and how to tackle the problems, so it was easier for him to tackle the great disaster when it struck. Whereas the first boy, he had never seen or faced such disasters, so he also used his resources and his mind to come up with certain solutions, but he was not as successful at improving the situation as the second one was. Hence the second one was soon elected governor of the nation. The first young man then understood that the greatest fame and wisdom is that which is born from the very things we do in life, from the impact they have on others, and from the need to improve ourselves every day. He never again took part in competitions or vain shows, and from then on, whenever he travelled, he would always be ready to offer a helping hand to all. So here, this is a story with a moral. Now, going to the questions, we will not be going back. We will try our best not to go and read the passage again. 16th, the fact that the boys were talented was a subject of envy for people around. The envy and jealousy has not been mentioned. That was evident even when they were quite young. Yes, given in the first paragraph. Something that was not entirely true. This is contradictory. Never obvious when they were children. It was very obvious when they were children. So the correct answer here would be option 2. The next question. The boys themselves were very arrogant as they were incredibly intelligent. Their arrogance is not mentioned. Very shy of showing to people how talented they were. Not mentioned again. Aware of the fact that they were gifted. This is clearly mentioned in the beginning of the passage. Never keen on making people think highly of them. This is again contradictory. So the correct answer 3. Both the boys had a desire to help people around, to be recognized as unique, to travel around the world, and to be the governor one day. So both of them had a desire to be recognized as unique, and they went about this in their own ways. So the correct answer would be option 2. The boys, once they grew up, shared the same school of thought, were always fighting with each other, separated due to personal differences. So 2 and 3 are quite similar, both ruled out. Used their talents in different directions. So they used their talents. It's written over there that they grew differently. Option 4. What did the first boy do using his skills and intelligence? Did nothing and ended up depressed? No. Used his skills and intelligence in a negative way? Negative way leading to devastation? No. Utilized his talent to have a bright future and be famous for his intelligence? Yes. Tried spreading what he learnt as a child? No. So correct answer 3. See, till now we have not been going back to the passage. From our first understanding, we have been answering all the questions correctly. How did the second boy use his talents? He started working with the first boy in order to learn something from him? No. He failed to perform as the other did, and was known as a failure? No. He took advantage of the other boy's fame. No. He used his talents to help the people around him. Yes, this is stated there. So, correct answer 4. Why did the second boy not follow the footsteps of the first boy? He did not like the first boy, irrelevant. He never wanted to compete with the first boy. See, he never wanted to compete as such, but he also wanted to be famous. He had his own aspirations. The third, he felt the responsibility to help people as he was better at everything. And even though he had his own goals and desires, the responsibility he felt towards helping people was more. So 3 is a better answer. People around him advised him not to follow the first boy's footsteps. Out of context. Correct answer 3. What did people think the first boy would become? That he would misuse his talents? No. They didn't expect anything of him. Again a no. That he would get into social service and do something good for mankind. But he was working for his own progress. The social service, the helping others part was what the second boy was doing. The questions are related to the first boy. That he would become one of the most important men in future. Yes. Correct answer 4. When disaster struck their land, the brilliant ideas of the first boy helped him overcome the problem completely. No, that completely part is wrong. Did little to solve the problem. Did little. That means, now see, little and a little grammatical thing over here. Little would mean almost nothing. So did little to solve the problem? Again, no. Helped him to get ideas from other people. Not mentioned. Improve the condition a little. A little, that means to some extent, not completely. So this is what is mentioned there. So 24th, option 4. See, grammar also plays a role. As a result of the second boy's good work during the disaster, he was promoted to a bigger position at his office. No. Given a lot of money and gifts? Not stated. Elected as the governor? Directly stated. Appreciated but not rewarded. This is contradictory. Correct answer 3. That brings us to the end of this session. Here is the key. Go ahead and attempt all the questions and check your answers against the key.